Our guest today is Bill.
Liberty Bill.
Liberty Bill Gibson, who's our treasurer, our beloved treasurer man, who puts his ass on the line 365 and a quarter days a year for the Libertarian Party.
Is he body?
Pardon?
You wish.
Okay.
Go to the.
And we are starting the recording, and for those who are new here, please raise your hands to be recognized. And finally, it is my great pleasure to give Bill Gibson the floor. I think he deserves a round of applause for being so patient. And I apologize for screwing this up.
Well, thank you. I am Liberty Bill Gibson. Happy to speak to you today. It's a topic that's kind of near and dear to my heart. I wanted to think about how cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin, as an example, can contribute to us increasing our own liberty. Let's go on to the first page. The Libertarian platform supports the idea that any individuals engaged in voluntary exchange should be free to use money, any mutually agreeable commodity or item. So I think we'd have to say it's a good libertarian thing to say, if two people can agree on what sort of money that they want to use between them, then they ought to be able to do it. Let's go on to the next one. So nope, you went too far. So the Federal Reserve. What is the Federal Reserve? And that's a heck of a question. This is a good book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. It's a heavy read. I understand that there's some others, Secrets of the Federal Reserve, but Eustace Mullins. And I was looking into it. The Federal Reserve says it is established to serve in the public interest, to preserve stability, to preserve monetary stability, financial stability. But even when they were first starting it, there was a guy named Hepburn. Even before it passed, it said about the upcoming Federal Reserve Act, it's to make all the incorporated banks together joint owners of a central dominant power. And this is the first time I've actually come to the realization that the Federal Reserve, and in fact the banking systems and the central banks throughout the world, can actually be modeled as a union. You think of a union, they like to preserve their own interests. They like to stop other people from competing with them. And that's my best description of what they're doing. The motivations back in 1913, they had a lot of competition from upstart banks on the western side of the United States. And they were taking away the money from the money center banks on the East Coast. So they wanted to somehow get the Western banks under control. They wanted the money elastic. They wanted to be able to mess with the money supply so they could print more or not print more as they wished. They wanted to have all the banks follow the same ratios and somehow make it so that a consumer wouldn't know which bank was safest, because all the banks used the same basic ratios of how risky they could be. They wanted to combine all of their reserves into a single reserve. Before the Federal Reserve, if one bank got out of control, there would be a run on that bank. It would go out of business, and you'd go to a bank that you could trust. Well, now, since it's a banking union, all the banks are following the same rules. And you may have noticed in the last 50 years, nobody really looks to see whether the bank that they're banking at is trustworthy. They're all at the same level of mistrust. So, and the last and the biggest obstacle that they had in creating the Federal Reserve System was to somehow convince Congress that it was in the public's interest to have this banking union. So that's the way I see the Federal Reserve. Can I show of hands how many people would like to end the Fed? All right, so I got a friendly crowd here. You guys came to it from your own directions, but that's a good way to go. Let's go to the next slide. So what is a cryptocurrency? I think Satoshi Nakamoto, whoever he is, said it best right there in his abstract of the original Bitcoin paper. And on the email when he transmitted this to say what he'd been working on a new electronic cash system that's fully peer-to-peer. Anybody can directly exchange value for product with anybody else in the world with no trusted third party. You don't need a bank. You don't need Uncle Bob to say that it's good. No trusted third party. So in the abstract, he says it again, a purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash allows online payments to be sent directly from one party to another without going through a financial institution. Now, the revelation for me, as going through and researching this topic, was that trusted third parties, that's where the risk is. When you trust the government, your risk is with the government. When you trust the bank, your risk is with the bank. Whoever it is you trust, that's the person that you're going to have trouble with in the future, because you've given them your currency, you've given them your value, you've given them something, and you somehow trust them. And that is where the risk is. If you don't trust them, you haven't transferred, you understand the risk, you've got it yourself. So that's the main point I want to make to you with cryptocurrencies. Go ahead, Blake.
Can I make a quick question? Amongst the Middle East, the culture of the Middle East, there are banking situations where you can go to a local guy, he can call somebody up and transfer it on his books, and they're transferring money. Is that the same kind of thing? Does that qualify as a peer-to-peer network? Like
No, because you're still going through a third party. You're still going through somebody you have to hand the money to, and you can see where that's the risk.
Mm-hmm.
What happened if that guy happens to have a gun and just blows you away after you give him the money? There's no way you're going to collect on it. So part of how he got away from having a trusted third party was he proposed a solution to the Byzantine generals problem. The Byzantine generals, you got a bunch of generals, some of them are traitors, that are out in the field, and they're supposed to agree on a time to attack. And the question is, how do you decide when is the right time to attack when you have a bunch of traitors in your midst? And the best you can do is to take a vote and hope that most of the people are not traitors, that most of the people are actually going to be honest. That is the consensus building mechanism of Bitcoin. You say, is this transaction legitimate? Do I actually have the money? You send out your proof that it's you, that it's your money, you'd like to spend it, and the consensus develops about whether you are allowed to spend that money. That is your money. It hasn't been spent before. So even in the Byzantine general's case, you've got to have a majority of how the decision is made. And what Satoshi did is just brilliant. Figured out a way to make that consensus occur through a bunch of independent distributed computers. Let's go on. Any questions at this level? That's just the basic definition of a crypto. I guess we should, just a second, just before you go ahead and start working on the video, and I'll some of the things I want to say about it is it's permissionless. Anybody can join and leave the network whenever they want. All of these nodes that are deciding who's legitimate and who's not, there's no permission required. The guy who's running for the chancellor back over in a European country was saying, hey, I'm the CEO of Bitcoin Cash. And everybody said, well, how's that? And he says, well, this whole world is permissionless. If I want to say I'm the CEO of Bitcoin Cash, I'm the CEO of Bitcoin Cash, because you can do it without permission. You don't have to ask to send money to somebody. You don't have to get anybody's permission. If you want to do business with somebody in Nairobi, if you can contact him, they've got a cell phone and you've got a cell phone, you can be in business.
Okay, I need 30 seconds to get the video up and running.
Go ahead and get it started. So we got no trusted third parties, no
There
permission.
can only be 21.
Go ahead, you can go ahead and start it, if you can show it. There we go. Awesome. I cut this down, it was a 25-minute video. You can, this is John McAfee. And it's a 25-minute interview on InfoWars. He was one of our libertarian
I love him.
candidates, and quite a character, but this kind of sums up the issues the best I could find.
He was one of the libertarian presidential candidates.
million bitcoins. That's the max. 4 million of them have already been lost. So now we're down to 17 million. And we have the entire world that will be potential users. Now, when I made that prediction, I am perfectly safe at $1 million at the end of 2020. See, here's the problem. Everybody is making predictions based on the old paradigm of investment and growth, where 10% is astonishing. But we get 20% a day, consistently sometimes with some cryptocurrencies. Why? Because the supply is limited. We can't print anymore. Like you can print more US dollars, you can print more British pounds, you can print more Japanese yen. You cannot create any more bitcoins and the maximum of 21 million. Now, if you take 21 million coins, and let's say only half of the world ends up using bitcoins, well, we've got 2.5 billion people using 21 million coins. Please just use your head. $1 million is nothing in 3 years, if I am correct. And I am correct.
We've got a lot of people that are saying that they expect by the end of next year, quite a few people said $40,000, $50,000. You're probably even higher than that in your estimation if it's going to get to a million by 2020. They're saying $40,000, $50,000 by the end of 2018 is what many people are expecting now.
No, my figure's at 78,000 by the end of 2018. However,
Coming on today.
so here's the problem. It does not matter whether governments like Bitcoin or not, whether banks like Bitcoin or not. And I was on with Jamie Dimon when he was saying Bitcoin was a fraud. Well, it's clearly not. Jamie Dimon is head of America's largest bank. Obviously, he's frightened. All banks are frightened. In 5 years' time, we will have no banks because everybody with a Bitcoin wallet will be its own bank. I can do wire transfers or the equivalent. I can be the equivalent of writing checks. Everything that a bank can do, my wallet can do. And this is the problem.
And people don't realize about 74% of the global Bitcoin trades are from South Korea and Japan, especially in Japan. They're using it quite a bit in terms of, we've now got you on the phone, let's see, in terms of, quite a bit in terms of actually purchasing stuff that's a threat to the central banks. And that's why there are so many efforts to try to undermine it. Go ahead.
Yes, so in September, I was supposed to give a talk in Beijing at BitCan, one of the largest Bitcoin conferences. The week before, China shut down the exchanges and made ICOs illegal, which was the topic of my talk. Had I shown up, I would have been arrested. The entire conference was moved to Hong Kong. Oddly enough, every keynote speaker that was to speak at that conference showed up in Hong Kong, and almost everybody who had registered. That shows the dedication. But let me get back to what we were discussing earlier. There's nothing that governments can do to shut down Bitcoin. Now, they could stop me from showing up in Beijing. I'm a human being. They could stop me at the airport and arrest me. They cannot stop and did not stop trading in Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency. It is impossible for a government to stop a distributed system like Bitcoin. And now
That's right. It actually went up, didn't it, in terms of the amount of Chinese yen buying in Bitcoin? It went up from 5, I think, to 20%, then it went back down to like 13%, but it actually is still 2 or 3 times what it was before they prohibited
what
it.
it was before. So prohibition requires enforcement. How do you enforce people not using Bitcoin? You would have to have an agent for every citizen within your country. They would have to come into your house and monitor your computer usage 24 hours a day. It's not possible. You cannot enforce any of these bans, and this is what governments do not understand. Banks are more terrified than governments. Governments are going to lose revenue if they're taxing income. Banks are going to lose their entire business because a wallet is a bank. End of story.
So do you see the banks trying to offer, and this is what a lot of people talk about, we see Venezuela is coming out and saying that they're going to offer a cryptocurrency. Interesting enough, because in Venezuela, they're one of these states like Zimbabwe and others where people are trying to flee the country with their capital. That's been one of the things that is so attractive about something like Bitcoin. And so now they're trying to come out and say, we're going to run a cryptocurrency for people. I think that's too little too late for Venezuela. But other countries have talked about going into competition with Bitcoin, like China and Russia as well.
Yes, but you cannot, because these cryptocurrencies that governments are offering are centralized. It's just like things are now. They have central control. They can control the price. They can control the fluctuations. They can control interest rates. No, Bitcoin is not centralized. It belongs to the people. It has taken power away from centralized governments and banks and given that power to the people. When a government issues its own cryptocurrency, they're missing the point. They're simply taking that power back. Are you going to accept that? I'm not. Go ahead and issue a cryptocurrency. America, England. I don't care. I'm not going to use it. I'm going to continue to use Bitcoin.
That's great. That's, I think, the real hope of humanity. Not that we're ever going to be able to audit the Fed, not that we're ever going to be able to shut down it or central banks, but that we would transcend it with new technology, with new cooperation, as we're doing with Bitcoin, that as the government and as these big multinational corporations like Google and Facebook, these constructs that work with the government, as they start to exercise control, as they start to take away our freedom of speech, our freedom to exchange information with other people, that we have these new constructs that come about that will replace the old DARPA-designed innovations.
Now, let's talk
Currencies. How does that?
Well, there are thousands of cryptocurrencies now, literally thousands. The top are things like Ethereum, Litecoin, Monero. Of those, Monero is the one that needs to be watched the closest, and here's why. The dark web is where Bitcoin first got its use. If you wanted to hire a hitman to buy illegal drugs, to get a live tiger from the jungles of Asia, you would pay in Bitcoins, all right? Now it's 100% Monero. Why? Because Bitcoin can be unwound with enough computing power and enough will. Like if the FBI wanted to, they could find out who a person was in a specific transaction.
With go back to the blockchain, they could go all the way back to when you first got into the system. Yeah.
Yes, but with Monero, it is impossible, utterly impossible. It is completely anonymous and completely private. So that is why in the dark web, everybody's using Monero. But what I have discovered is what starts in the dark web in terms of cryptocurrencies leaks out into the world of light, the world of above board business. Because all people, I believe, all people would like to have anonymity and privacy in terms of their financial transactions. And if I'm right, then Monero bears watching very closely.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, Marcy?
Oh, yeah, just leave it right there. Okay, that should be a nice, warm topic for discussion. I'd like to ask if anybody wants to. Let's not talk about the limited supply or what the value is going to go to. But does anybody want to question on the? Doesn't matter whether governments or banks like Bitcoin. Bitcoin being we can hold off on the fraud. The international nature of Bitcoin. There's nothing governments can do to shut it down. Anybody have something they want to go?
We have somebody behind you, and then somebody who's raising their hand.
Yeah, so we've got 3 or 4. Let's go ahead and get those topics out in the air.
Yell
I wonder if it is truly as safe as you say. When the government of Germany got nervous about Bitcoin, they sent orders to Interpol, who talked with their U.S. federal counterparts, who then arrested 17 people for selling Bitcoin. And this was not an isolated incident, this was a dress rehearsal. For now, everybody who deals in Bitcoin is subject to the arbitrary whim of our out-of-control central government.
Bitcoin is open. If you do a deal with Bitcoin, you have to assume that it can be unwound. We have personal knowledge here of people that were persecuted because they were selling or trading Bitcoin for dollars right here in the state of Colorado, with 22 or 27 SUVs coming up to their house for the raid. So yes, Bitcoin is open. If you're going to be dealing with somebody at a coffee shop because you went on to local Bitcoin, you are at risk. So in terms of safety from the government, you don't really have it with Bitcoin. What you do have is if they want to take it, they have to come get it. They have to make your life very painful for you to give them up a Bitcoin. If they want to take your money that's in a bank, they just tell the bank. So they have to go through some due process to come after you with Bitcoin. So that's the, we may not like the due process, but it's better than just telling the bank to fork over all your funds, which does happen.
Okay, who else? Please raise your hands. Okay, could
got
I
John
ask
and
you
Heidi.
to please stand and identify yourself if you wish to, or remain anonymous if you wish to.
John Kyle, I just think my question would be, it's not really a question, but more of a statement. I think Kathy kind of jumped over the Venezuelan government creating a cryptocurrency. Me and Lance and several of us talked about it before this started, but the monopoly that the central government has over the taxing of the country and these things, they can require that you pay in their blockchain. That will create artificial demand. They can require, let's look at the petrodollar. They require that oil be purchased in the dollar. That gives the dollar artificial demand. So they can not necessarily ban Bitcoin. I agree with that point that they can't really ban it, but they can create artificial demand for their blockchain and outcompete it through a monopoly on force. And that's one thing that I think is gravely overlooked by most people who are into Bitcoin. I'm a big fan of blockchain technology. I'm not a hater. I own it. I trade it. And I just think that point is overlooked in many cases.
Can I ask Lance to talk about Venezuela for just a little bit? He seems to have he's got a friend in Venezuela.
Yeah, we spoke about it.
Yeah, so I have you want me to stand up too? Right.
Whatever you feel like.
Yeah, or not.
So I've got a buddy that lives down there, and he's a trader, and so I'll just kind of read. A couple days ago, about a week ago, I asked him what his take was on a headline, and it was, "Enter the Petro, Venezuela to launch oil-backed cryptocurrency." So I asked him what he thinks about this, and he says, "It's too soon to know who is behind that and how they're going to be held in the virtual structure. In 2009, all of my clients were brokers, and the government in that time just took their businesses by rejecting their brokers' licenses and confiscating all their goods. After I said so, I can tell you that I've been meeting with 2 of those clients here in Florida because they are willing to invest again in trading cryptocurrencies, offices, and farms in Venezuela because the price of energy is so cheap down there. I really would like to express myself with better English, but I lost well." So that's kind of what he said. So his sentiment is, he's obviously very, and I think rightly so, like John is skeptical of the government and them getting their own blockchain on board and starting to do a Fed coin, quote unquote, and sort of forcing people to pay, their profits off of whatever Bitcoin they've invested in for that year, and then paying it in their Fed coin, and sort of getting us to try to transition and migrate in it. So it's a point to be well taken.
Thank you. Who was next?
Anybody else?
Okay.
Bill.
Larry.
Larry. Okay, Larry, please.
I'm a little concerned about what Ken had mentioned about arrest. I was wondering what the charges were. Money laundering. Money laundering.
Yeah, there's only- I think
predicted
there-
that personally.
Yeah, there's one state where you don't get charged with money laundering. But yeah,
Am I wrong? But when I first signed up for my
Please stand.
John Kyle again. When I first signed up for my accounts to acquire Bitcoin, Coinbase, Kraken is actually what I use now, which is actually not. I was going to try to make a trade while we were here, but Kraken's been acting weird the last couple of days. I don't know if anybody else uses them, but Wyoming, correct, is really hard to use Bitcoin in because of something.
Haven't heard about that.
Anybody heard of that? But when I was signing up, it was brought up like, do you live in these states?
Yeah.
And those states, so the government, as much as we say the government can't affect it, I think it is still affecting it in some ways.
yeah. I'll talk more about that. Okay, let's go on then. We've got the. Let's go on to the next slide.
That's what the site is called.
Yeah, the state of Shapeshift, which I understand has actually got a headquarters here in Boulder, is won't sign up people from the state of Washington because they require too much information. And this guy in Shapeshift says, well, if you want that much information, I'm not going to do it. And that's a pinch point. We'll talk about that. I want to do a little fundamental here on price. So this is an old marketing curve. I want to thank Michael Casey. He did a speculative theory of adoption price in the Medium Network about Bitcoin. So you start off with the innovators, the first 2.5%, and the early adopters. And most people in the Bitcoin world say we're somewhere here where this curve, let's go on to the next slide. This curve, this curve of adoption translate into this curve of penetration. So this is when you get 100% market penetration. So basically, as long as the number is going, has this concavity here in the curve, then there's a, you're still on the up ramp. And if we're really down here somewhere 10% of the final number of people that are going to be Bitcoin users, and we're somewhere way early, just transitioning between innovators and early adopters, somewhere in the 2.5 to 3% of the people. So another 33 times the number of people are going to come into Bitcoin and to cryptos in general. I don't want to say crypto, Bitcoin all the time, because Bitcoin could be MySpace. It could be that Monero has to take over, or one of the alternatives becomes the one. But in the world of cryptos, I think we're down in that 3% level.
And I would actually say we're probably at the 1%. In all the circles that I run in, I'm actually, there's a lot of people friends that I have that are professional traders of stocks and bonds and treasury notes and all that other stuff. And now they're starting to segue into cryptocurrencies, and all of them are telling me, based on what they see as far as adoption rates and market value, that we're actually, they think, only in the 1%. So even before that.
Even before that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm ready for the next slide. Now, in case you think this S-curve is just made up, here's some S-curves from the last century. We've got, I lost the legend on that. Let's see if I can get it on this one. Okay, there it is. So the telephone is this dotted line, runs up like that, but it's basically got the S-curve. It took it 100 years to get full penetration. We've got electricity, 1900 is pretty much full penetration here by 1950. The radio, 1920. It comes up and makes its S-curve and gets full penetration also late 1950s. You got the clothes washer, the clothes dryer, color TV. You see these curves are getting a little bit faster. We got the microwave, first one in 1975. We've got it full penetration certainly by now. Cell phones, internet. Here at 2005, they were still just at the edge of their thing, but we're talking a 10 or 20 year number for going from starting to full penetration, whereas the poor old telephone took it almost 80 years to get from the start of the telephone to full penetration of the market.
Didn't it have help from the government?
Did it have help or did it have hindrance from the government? I guess that's what we have to think about. Maybe 75 years was hindrance. It was a regulated thing.
I was being skeptical about
Yeah.
that.
That's actually a very good point. Now, electricity, although has the same sort of characteristic in terms of government, I guess. But yes, non-governmental adoption curves can be a whole lot faster than government adoption curves. All right, let's go to the next one.
Yes.
So with these curves, you'll every once in a while see a number that says the number of Bitcoin users is doubling every year. And I thought, well, that's a nice generalization. Let's see what it looks like in the real world. And I actually found a chart from Bitcoin.info or blockchain.info, the number of their wallets. And 830,000 in December of 2013, 2.6 million, so that tripled in December of 2014. But I love these doublings. 2.6 million 2014, 5.2 million 2015, 10.5 million 2016, and when I looked at December 10th, 2017, it's at 20.2 million. So this is my assertion to you that Bitcoin adoption is growing. Wallets are growing at double a year. And when it gets down to just growing at a regular rate, then we can say we're somewhere else on the adoption curve. But as long as it's exponential, we're still in the early stages of adoption. Go ahead, Les.
Just like Facebook and MySpace and other places, how many of those wallets are actively used? Did you have a lot of users on Facebook?
I have two
actively
blockchain wallets, three, some number like that. I got one for my business and one for me personally. So I know I use mine, but you're right. There's always that. But still, if only 10% of them are being used, the ratios are still doubling every year. Yes.
Bill, as you know, I'm into the weeds and the principles and the background, and the principle that strikes me here is that wage and price control, and a couple other things, always result in market distortions, shortages, and black markets. And what I see right now is not necessarily a new developing technology that fits these other things. It could be just a black market, and it also could act like the tulip mania, where it increases like this and then collapse. I don't think that I think the principle here is this is a black market currently, and that creates some different issues and different problems. On the other hand, the reason decentralized decision-making and non-authoritarian forces work, or one of the reasons, is because of being able to learn from experience and adjust and change, which government can't do. So I think there's a lot of potential here, but at least at the moment I'm still seeing it looking and acting like a black market.
Well, we love black markets.
Well,
Internet
I'm
people.
not saying that's necessarily wrong.
You look at the first thing that made the internet popular were all things that were marginal, black market, gray market, stuff like that. It only came out into the light, as John McAfee says, later. But everybody wanted to be able to communicate with everybody else. And I think everybody's going to want to exchange money with everybody else.
I guess my point is you can't tell. You really can't say how
Right,
it's going to go.
right. And in fact, I'm going to try not to give advice today. I can tell you what I'm doing and what I'm thinking, but you have got to do your own due diligence. You've got to figure out for yourself, because there is every perspective out there.
Oh, yeah.
And there's people I really respect that think this is a disaster, a scam, only bad guys use it. Peter Schiff I love. My perspective is,
He doesn't really hate blockchain, though.
He just hates that gold is not expanding. He's not making any money. It's just totally true. He's not making any
heard
money
about
right
that.
now.
He
He's
was
pissed.
unlucky
He's
moving
admitted that.
forward.
Whoa,
Yeah.
whoa, whoa!
All right,
Let-
let me go ahead and give. I've got one image here that you've got your banks. They just passed the bail-in laws. The next time your bank goes out of business or starts to get in trouble, you're going to get bank shares instead of getting your money back. The FDIC is a farce. But the laws are all there so that once you've got your money in the bank, if things go bad and you threaten to take it out, they can say, oh no, you can't take out more than $200 this week. You can't use your ATM more than once a week. Those are the rules that it's already in the laws. If things get bad, and things get bad for the bank, and you can see this where if it's the banking union that makes the rules to preserve stuff for the banks, they're going to preserve their stuff. They're going to trap you in the U.S. dollar in their banks. And if you try to get out, like if you try to leave to another country, they've got a expatriation tax of 50% of your value if you try to take your money out of the country. So you've got this pressure building. It's like a big balloon. The normal escape valve, the one that Peter Schiff and all of us gold bugs, because I consider myself a gold bug as well, the normal pressure valve is well, I'm going to go move my money into gold and silver, and I'm going to go bury it under a tree out in the field, and tell a couple of people where I buried it, and that's just going to be the way I can get out of this system. And they've managed to take a bunch of their money they're printing and sell the gold and silver market short, so gold and silver don't look like an escape valve anymore. And part of that pressure, I think it's very significant that Satoshi did this in 2009. You've got to look at the date. You can see that they did the bail-ins, and then all of a sudden the inventors, the necessity is the mother of invention, somebody said, hey, us geeks, we've been around for a while, we can do something geeky here to preserve value and get it out of the system. So we got a lot of people who want to talk about that.
Raise your hand, and Bill, could you just give a 30-second or a 15-second summary of what a bail-in is?
A bail-in is, oh gee, I'm sorry, my bank went out of business or has made too many obligations, so I can't pay my bills, but I've got all these deposits. So if I'm MF Global, or if I'm a bank in Cyprus, I'm just going to take 50% of your deposits, of any deposits over $10,000, and I'm going to use that to pay my bills. I hope you don't mind. And that's a bail-in. You end up getting a share of bank stock instead of having the money that you thought you had deposited. When you deposit your money in the bank,
No longer yours.
it's not your money. It's the bank's money. You are an unsecured creditor of the bank. You are not even a high on the creditor list. You're at the lowest level of the creditors of the bank.
Last person to get paid.
You're the last person to get paid when the bank goes under. And so that's a bail-in, and they've got it throughout the countries that are controlled by the bankers' unions. That is the rule, that bail-in is going to be the next way to handle a financial crisis.
So, I believe that we have Mike, Larry, I just blanked on your name. I'm so sorry. Blake.
Blank plate.
Tampa.
And then we have the person who does not wish to be identified behind Bill. So, Mike, you are next.
With regard to doing your own research, let me just give a little bit of perspective. The way you create a tradable market is a difference of opinion. If everybody agreed that Bitcoin was indeed a scam and that it had no value, of course the value of Bitcoin would almost immediately crash to zero. And by the way, just as an aside, if that should happen, you'd have a really hard time getting out of whatever Bitcoin you have, because everybody will be going stampeding for the exit at the same time, and most people will just get crushed. On the other hand, if everybody agrees that Bitcoin is the greatest thing since sliced bread, Bitcoin would quickly approach infinity. So the fact that Bitcoin continues to be climbing what is sometimes referred to as a wall of worry is a good sign that you have a tradable market, and it may not be Bitcoin that will be the ultimate cryptocurrency, but just to let everybody know, if you get a lot of conflicting opinions, that's a good sign that you have a tradable market. Now, that was my comment. With regard to my question, I actually saw an interesting suggestion that the creation of Bitcoin was, in effect, at least partially initiated by the CIA, because they have the muscle power and such, and the timing is such that. Bill, any comments on Bitcoin actually being a CIA plot?
I actually have a little slide on all the alarmists. Government employees that I've met were not that clever.
Okay.
How many CIA operatives have you met?
Two.
That
you know
Three.
I was just kidding. And I heard it was NSA.
Well, NSA, yeah. There's an NSA paper. We'll I'll mention that. It was one in 1996, but it didn't get decentralization. It was the Fed coin. It was the I've got control coin. It's a coin that I believe the Federal Reserve will be rolling out, just like Venezuela's rolling out. The idea that a immutable ledger, so you can keep track of everybody's spending. Government's been wanting that forever. But I think this is just a genie that escaped the bottle. Next.
Blake, could I ask you to please stand for the camera?
Oh, do I have to?
Vice President.
Okay, fine. So, you're wrong.
Okay.
The last people to get paid are not the depositors. The shareholders are the last people to get paid. And if you get bank stock in exchange for your deposits, you go down to the bottom of the barrel.
Wonderful. Thank you. Anybody else? Larry had one, or John?
Go ahead, Larry.
Okay, now we have Larry, and that you don't need to stand because
Camera works. Okay.
I do ask you to please speak up or move the microphone to Larry.
First, a comment in regard to vocabulary here. I would suggest that a better paradigm or counterexample for the banks is not a union, but a guild. And if you look at the way the guilds operated, I think you'll see that the banks probably should name themselves guilds instead of associations. And a comment, I have a question. You guys may be up, you or whoever else here may be up on Venezuela, because when Venezuela is mentioned, there was a lot of head nodding. I only know about the experience in Venezuela from a Reason article about 15 months ago. Okay? And I'm particularly interested in the experience of that individual that they used as an example there, who was a Bitcoin miner, and making enough that he could then operate in his incredibly bankrupt environment in Venezuela. Is there any way how an individual can accomplish that, even in America, but it doesn't have to be that collapse, but to actually go from, okay, I'm trading in my currency, and now I want to buy food. How would that work in general?
It's an amazing thing. I mean, we've got then the people in Venezuela. That guy with the miner, he was using too much electricity, so the electricity police came and took his miner. But he had in his computer a little thing to let him know that somebody else was using it. He found out that the police didn't just take his miner, they were using it. So we're running into a situation here where the enforcers, prohibition requires enforcement. They will come for you if they know you're doing this, and pretty soon, as they run out of money to pay the police, they will come for you and they'll take your assets just so they can pay themselves. I mean, that's the way it works with the Venezuelan police. So you have to think about that coming here, that enforcement thing. on terms of being able to buy food, they're doing that in Venezuela. They're going to Amazon and getting food orders and getting food delivered into Venezuela because they have Bitcoin to buy it with. That's happening.
Are you saying that Amazon is accepting Bitcoin now?
Amazon's not, but it's easy to transfer.
There's an intermediary. They're
Yeah.
buying gift cards from.
Yeah, you buy a gift card. And there's one of the guys in that article also escaped Venezuela. He managed to the airlines are accepting it, so you can use Bitcoin to get out of Venezuela. So he was a software guy, and made enough money software contracting to get out of Venezuela, and all of his payments came to him in Bitcoin, and he used Bitcoin to buy his plane ticket to get out. So, Open Bazaar.
That would be money laundering, right?
In the United States, it would. Open Bazaar, no, it wouldn't, because you never actually. Anyway, it's a good question. Plus, they don't enforce the money laundering law if you're in the state that doesn't require a money laundering license, so there's a chance there. Open Bazaar is a distributed eBay, and I've signed up for it, but I haven't figured out anything to sell. But it has a similar thing. When you put in an Open Bazaar store, you become a node on the distributed eBay. So they can't come and shut down some central location. They can come to you and shut down your computer, and your store will go away. But the network of being able to buy and sell whatever you want on eBay is also available in the world of cryptos. So that's happening, and there's a bunch of other stuff that's happening. So yeah, there's ways out.
We have two more people which speak, but
I'm going to have to run.
15
Okay,
minutes.
let me go ahead and run through the slides.
So I apologize to our two guests.
And you got knowledgeable people here, so just because I run away at 1:45 doesn't mean the conversation has to stop. Let's go down to the what is money slide, and that there we go. So we got government money. That's what you were talking about. It's a tradition, for thousands of years. The government has paid their employees and paid their suppliers with something, and they've demanded that something be used to pay your taxes back to the government. So there's always going to be a government money. Whoever's got the monopoly on force will be saying, here, you have to pay your taxes, and you have to pay them the way I tell you to pay them. That's part of what happened in the original Revolutionary War. They had to pay their taxes in gold. Individual money, and that's what we're talking about, money can be whatever you accept in exchange for your goods and services. And it's also, you can use it to whatever you can give other people to get their goods and services. That's your individual money. So all these definitions of money, there's a lot of fancy ones and fungible and all of that, what makes a good money. But basically, if you can get something for it, it's money. If you're willing to give something for it, it's money. So don't want to get too stuck on it being a digital or a piece of paper or a big rock in that island in the South Pacific. And a store of value is something you keep because you think you're going to be able to buy something with it later. So even a dollar from a paper dollar from 1913, you can keep that as a store of value. And when you used to be able to buy a whole bag of gumballs for a dollar in 1913, you can buy a single gumball for $1 now, or two of them for 50 cents now. You could still buy something with it. It was a store of value. It just wasn't a real good store of value. So let's go on to the next one. So money is all that. So here's some of the alarmist things that I found. That Bitcoin is a scam. Catherine Austin Fitts, I love her. She is really good. She's the one that does the accounting and the $21 trillion that's gone missing from adjustments, financial adjustments in the United States government over the last 20 years. There's this, I don't know if you remember on September 10th, 2001, when Rumsfeld came up and said, We lost $3 trillion, and we're going to start trying to look for it on September 10th, 2001. Now, nobody really remembers that because something else happened on September 11th. So that accounting never got followed up on. The NSA did it. We've heard that one. I don't think they're smart enough. That guy, whoever did Satoshi, that's an Einstein. I mean, that's like looking at when I read that paper, I was in awe. The guy, and it's the same way I felt when I read Einstein's conclusions when he said, okay, if the speed of light is the same, no matter what your frame of reference, then it implies your mass changes, your energy changes, everything else it implied. He got out of that just from that simple statement that it didn't matter what your frame of reference was, the theory of relativity. Satoshi, solving the Byzantine generals problem in distributed computing, as well as coming in with the signed blockchain so that every transaction that happened would get sealed up in the list of previous transactions, so you can't fake it, you can't double spend, you can't counterfeit, none of that stuff. It's brilliant. So let's go on to the so I don't think the NSA did it, mostly because I don't think they can. Quantum computing will make it obsolete. I don't know. I'm not, that's above my pay grade. I don't know how good quantum computing is. I don't know how it can solve this problem. But other than that, government will successfully outlaw it. They're going to use the pinch points of fiat exchange to enforce it. I think that was your case, John. So whenever you try to change and get out of the crypto world and go back to dollars or lira or euros or yuan, that's a point where the government can point to and stop you.
And they have.
And they will, and they're going to get worse. So you meet these guys. What Andreas Antonopoulos has been traveling around for the last 4 years, only on Bitcoin. He's managed to organize his life in such a way that he never has to change it back to fiat. So there's hope, but you got it. You know, you may have to really leave the system to do it. It may get a little awkward. Government will windfall profits tax it to death. Well, certainly they're going to try. That's they'll say, oh, it's a Bitcoin profit, so instead of you paying capital gains, you're going to have to pay 90% of your profit. I mean, they make any law they want. It's not impossible. It's a Ponzi, and I don't see that. I just don't see it. The early people they're getting paid, but they're not cashing out. Everybody's holding. Everybody's a hodler. There's a new word that's come into meaning for all the people that have cryptos and don't want to sell them. They're holding on for dear life. HODL. They're hodlers. So you'll hear the word hodl or hodlers more often in the next few years. Let's go on to the next one.
Okay.
Or not. Okay, it's a bubble. It's a bubble. This is okay. It didn't quite show up as well as I'd hoped, but we got the Tulip Mania bubble is this little light blue one, and the Bitcoin bubble as of today is right there. So there's a lot of bubbles. It could be a bubble. You got to do your own due diligence. I look at that adoption curve, and as long as it's growing, I'm happy. And even if it doesn't grow exponentially, I'm still happy. So that's why I think it's not a bubble. The other thing is, if you look at the denominator, you've got to wonder. You've taken, if you were looking at the value of the US dollar in Weimar, Germany, you'd say, oh my gosh, the US dollar is a bubble. Why is it going up so much against our Weimar Republic marks? It would look just like this. Everybody was trying to get out.
US dollar is headed for zero.
And all the fiat currencies in the world are in a race to the bottom. So it looks like this against all those fiat currencies. They keep them all on their way down symmetrically. But
Well,
let me go on to one more.
okay.
All right, so my summary, and thank you very much for having me here today. I got a few more slides at the back, but they were just in case. World central banks comprise a guild. Let's call it a guild. You may be right about that. The guild is a nice terminology. The guild, the union, they're together. They've been acting for their mutual benefit, for the exclusion of other people, just like any other union or guild. You don't want too many carpenters, so you have a carpenters union. You don't want too many doctors, so you have a doctors union, and you make it tough to be a doctor. And you say, oh, this is good. We're going to have better carpenters. We're going to have better doctors because the government somehow got involved. So it's got the same restriction on trade that you can think of traditionally. I think the cryptocurrencies have made the bankers union and fractional reserve banking obsolete. We're still on the innovator adopter stage of this change, and there's still time. As far as I'm concerned, there's still plenty of time to get in. As long as that curve is still sloping up, you might as well at least put your toe in the water. Figure out get an account on Coinbase, get a little bit of Litecoin or Bitcoin, and then try to move it off to a wallet. Don't leave it there, because wherever you change it from a crypto to a dollar or to a fiat, that's where the government can get to it, and they've already got the access from the courts to 14,000 names of people that did $20,000 worth of transactions in Coinbase. So those 14,000 people are going to get to hear from the IRS, and you have to expect that that's going to happen. You got to keep records and do all of that, so that when they do come calling, you're not shocked. The other thing that I want you to take from this is, when you have somebody that you're trusting, a trusted third party, you shouldn't be trusting them. You got to figure out how to make your life so you don't have a trusted third party, a bank, a government, whoever it is you're trusting. That's where your risk is. So let's go to the last slide.
Does your last slide say, trust me?
It does. No, it's a picture of John McAfee burning a $100 bill, and our little meme that we put out on the Boulder County Libertarian Facebook site. Thanks, Lance. He's been doing a great job on that site. And in truth, the central bank is already a barbarous relic. You may recognize that quote.
Yeah.
So thank you, guys. And
And you have to run, and we will continue this. I'm going to stop the recording for just a moment so that we can, for technical reasons. Start recording. Okay. Mr. Mystery Speaker, please speak. Loudly.
I decided today to open a bank and to call it No One. Our slogan will be Trust No One.
Oh, nice.
In terms of Vietnam, at the end of the U.S. war there were two kinds of people, those who had gold and those who are still in Vietnam. In terms of Cyprus, I would study it carefully because it's a precursor to the U.S. It was a dress rehearsal. First, they did a bail-in and stole a lot of money. And secondly, Bitcoin flourished there, even though it was many years ago. They could buy houses in Bitcoin. So it was an almost instant conversion from fiat money and all of the fish hooks in that sandwich over to cryptocurrency almost instantly.
Okay, our future speakers, future questioners are Mike, Ralph, Larry. Anybody else wish to speak? Your name again, sir. John. Anybody else besides John wish to speak? We have Lance. Anybody else wish to speak? So the list is now Mike, Ralph, Larry, John, and Lance.
And Heidi.
And Heidi!
Thank you.
So,
that was Heidi, was the top.
Mike!
Two comments. Here in the United States, asset forfeiture is a really big issue with regard to Bitcoin. They can just take all of your computers, and they don't even have to charge you with a dime, because your things, including your Bitcoin, are not do not need to follow due process. So one of the issues currently with Bitcoin is that the government could, if they're clever enough, take your Bitcoin and not even charge you with a dime. That's item number one. With regard to money laundering is written to be so encompassing and vague that basically it can mean just about anything, and it's a 20-year jail sentence. And so it basically is a nearly unlimited license for government to intrusion if they charge you with money laundering. And like I said, it can mean anything they want it to mean.
Anybody wish to comment on what Mike had to say? Otherwise, I'm next. I'm going to take a little bit of issue about trusted third parties. In point of fact, are a trusted. Boy, the grammar gets weird here. There is a trusted third party when dealing with any cryptocurrency. And in terms of Bitcoin, what happens is that a transaction comes into the system, to this peer-to-peer system, and a majority of computers decides whether or not the transaction is valid. So if somehow the government or a private person decides to create enough, not just doubt, but create enough computers who are doing the Bitcoin mining so that they become a majority of representation, they can become the arbiter of what is or what isn't a legitimate transaction. At that point, the trusted third party becomes that person or organization, and they can do with Bitcoin whatever it is that they want. In point of fact, if memory serves me, that actually did happen. Not that they took advantage, but one organization did at one point become the majority of computers, and they could have basically stolen billions of dollars. Mike, just 1 second. Point of fact, Mike, I'm going to put you after Heidi. I apologize. So there's that. In terms of the NSA did it, the algorithms that are used in cryptography for Bitcoin is something called elliptical cryptography. I won't get into the details of it, but back in 2014, it was discovered by RSA that the NSA did put a backdoor, a way of breaking the cryptography of the elliptical cryptography system. That backdoor has been eliminated. I don't know if there are any more. But if at some point somebody decides or is able to break this, what appears to be a very much more secure system than the old RSA system of public and private keys, there are still public and private keys involved. If it's discovered that that crypto system is crackable, I can assure you Bitcoin will disappear as a safe vehicle for doing transactions.
Almost instantly.
Almost instantly, Mike, you say
Yes.
that the system will collapse?
Yep.
I would agree. Okay, so our next person is Mr. Larry.
On practical ways to get involved, I know one additional scare tactic that has come out, and wanted some reaction to that. And that was, this came from the European Union. I'm not sure exactly which officials involved, but said a problem with Bitcoin, an immediate problem with Bitcoin, is that it's using as much electricity as the entire state of Denmark. Well, I'm wondering if there's something rotten in the state of Denmark. Okay, but does anybody have any view on that?
I'll talk to that when it's my turn.
Okay, and I would like someone, because I'm not as well versed in the history of Bitcoin and such, but when McAfee first showed up, okay, one of the initial statements he said, or showed up on the screen, was that there can only be 21 million Bitcoins, except we've lost 7.
Four.
Excuse me, 4. That's right. That's, a mistake in my notes here. Lost 4. Does anybody know how that happened? And what the general effect of losing 4 million Bitcoins at this stage of the process happened? Or
Losing happened because people lost their passwords to their wallet. So your wallet, like, I don't remember who said it, but they said, I think it was actually Bill, said, don't leave it on the exchange, put it in your wallet. Your wallet has a secure password that you have to remember to get access back to your Bitcoin.
Was that Goss Mountain?
Mount Gox.
Mount Gox.
Mount
correct.
Goss.
So that's where the loss comes in, is people bought, I don't know, thousands of them back when they were worth 50 cents, 10 cents, whatever it was, put them in a wallet, didn't think about it for 5 years, and then they can't find their password, and they've got thousands of Bitcoins that they have no access to because they don't know their password.
Not only that, leaving them on these exchanges. And
Hold on 1 second. Lance, you are next, but let me get this microphone to you.
so people are leaving them on these exchanges, which is haphazard because a lot of them, I think Ralph made this point earlier, are getting shut down. Or no, John maybe. If you can't be in a certain state or a certain country, if you have everything on there and all of a sudden the feds come in or the SEC and says no more, well then you have no access to that. So at the end of the day, you should be storing these on cold wallets or a hard wallet, and then
Could you expand on that a little bit more?
And the effect really quick would be just deflationary. So it just makes the value of all the Bitcoins that we have access to higher.
yeah,
That's all the effect.
yeah, scarcity.
Well, I understand that.
So, Lance, could I ask you to please specify where the safest place to store your Bitcoin is? It's in your own wallet?
In a safe that nobody knows about, somewhere that nobody knows about, is the best place.
More.
And there's two different ways you can do it. One is you can put it on. You can literally get down to a paper level password, which is basically your seed of your wallet. It's I think a 12 word, 12 or 13 word, and it can be totally random or whatever. And then the other way is there's these hard wallets that are coming out now. Like if you Google Nano S,
Yeah, awesome.
They're great.
Super backordered.
Yeah, I know. I wanted them for stocking stuffers, but so those are two ways to get them off, and that's what we do at home. Is everything's off the exchanges 100% if you can get them off. So
How often do you take things off the exchanges?
immediately, as soon as you can. Now the problem with that with sometimes is there's new coins that come out, like IOTA. IOTA's one that's very popular right now because Microsoft is potentially partnering with them, and there's not a stable wallet to get them off the exchange. So, that's why if you're going to get into this, get it off as soon as you possibly can. And get it off in a good place, like a hard seriously piece of paper or like these Nano S's.
The Nano S are the easiest.
Whoa! It's Heidi, Mike, Ralph, and then who wants to speak now? John again? Okay. So Heidi, please stand so I can get to our camera.
Could the people at the table, anybody care to make a prediction about where Bitcoin will be in 1 year or 5 years?
50,000
$50,000 when?
dollars by the end of 2018.
2020,
John?
2000.
Blake?
2020, 2000.
Bitcoin Cash. It's like,
2000,
He can.
2020?
you can't.
At the end of 2020?
Correct.
Anybody else?
I would echo Ken's prediction.
Okay.
Mike, I'm sorry,
I'll make a
Scott.
prediction.
Okay.
There's no way to know. it's worthless to predict.
The hardest thing to predict is the future.
Yes. Well, you don't.
Thank you.
It's just like being on that curve. You don't know
You can predict the
whether
past.
it's a bubble curve or what kind of curve it is. It's like predicting global climate. You don't know all the factors involved in it. You can't know what it's going to be in the future.
Mike, you're next.
Let me see. Well, the one thing about I want to talk about is cold storage, which you referred to, and
Please, quiet, please.
it's actually pretty simple. You create a wallet, move everything into that wallet, and when you create, if you use something like mycelium or what's the other one? Anyway, if you use a lot of common wallets, they will let you take that particular account, the wallet account, and give you 12 or 13 words, and you just write those down, and you can bury them in a hole just like you did with gold. And as long as you're the only person that knows those 12 or 13 words, you have access to that account. I kind of think of it as a Swiss numbered account where if you don't know the number, you don't have access. So with Bitcoin, instead of it being a number, it's 12 or 13 words. As long as you know those and nobody else has access to those, you have complete control over that, and nobody else can get to those Bitcoin.
Okay.
I want you to respond.
We have Ralph, then John. Anybody else wish to speak?
Yeah. Let me add one other comment. That it's actually predicted that by 2020, the whole process of Bitcoin mining will use all electricity. So obviously that's not sustainable and something we'll need to change. Right now the cost of the electricity used in Bitcoin mining. And Bitcoin mining, by the way, is the same process that's used for validation and creating consensus. So Bitcoin mining and creating consensus are the same process. Anyway, so by 2020, theoretically, that will use all electricity. So something has to give there. And we'll see how that one turns out.
Okay. Anybody else wish to speak? Lance, you wanted to say something? And
I wanted a full term.
Wait a second. It's Ralph, John, Lance. Did you want to?
Yeah, I wanted a full term. Yeah.
Okay, so
I'm fine.
Ralph is next. Does anybody know what the first real life transaction in Bitcoin was?
Pizza!
Somebody bought a pizza.
All right.
No, it's a parachute.
John! And please stand, John.
I'll actually let Lance go because I'm interested to see what he says, and then I'll follow up.
Okay. Anybody who has kids, young enough for this, I recommend actually the Jekyll Island book by the Tuttle twins. It's condensed to like 20 pages, and my daughter loves it. Like, she's just a natural libertarian. So it's cool. I'd recommend everybody to check out Banking on Bitcoin on Netflix. It cleared up everything for my beautiful wife over here after that. After we watched it, she just completely, totally got how it worked. Just from like a nerdy standpoint, right? That's kind of, there's so much nerd level in this whole thing. The miners, in my opinion, are the banks. I don't even think your wallet is the bank. I actually think the miners are the bank. So people who are mining are literally becoming the bank and issuing currencies or just hodling if they are. Bill mentioned Monero. There's another coin that I would recommend everybody take a look at if they're interested. It's very cheap to purchase right now, and it's also 100% private, and it's called Bytecoin. BYTECOIN. It runs on the Monero network, so it's completely anonymous.
Where do you get it?
Where do you get it? You have to go on, I think you can get it on Binance.com.
Could you spell that, please?
BINANCE.com. And the last thing is, I don't know if everybody heard, but Janet Yellen, our wonderful Fed chair, was cackling on about Bitcoin and how it's worthless. It's not a good store of value. The IRS is actually treating it as property.
Yep.
And not a currency, right? Because they can't have these competing currency. But what I find as a libertarian, what's incredibly interesting about that is it totally sets up the argument for taxation as theft. Because if you believe in personal property and people are taking it by force, well, there you go. So that's all I have to say.
And the next person is John. Please, John, rise.
So I just had a few questions for anybody if they'd heard these terms. Bitcoin is undertaking the Lightning Network. I just learned about this recently, and I have very little knowledge of it, so maybe Lance can shed some light there. And also something that wasn't mentioned today that maybe some of the newer people into Bitcoin aren't familiar with is the forks. They say 21 million limited. Well, Bitcoin, I think, has already forked.
Had a hard fork.
It's forked twice now, or I'm not sure if 3 times now. Ethereum's forked as well. It is an open source technology, and so that means that you can literally just copy it and call it something else. So there is a limit of 21 million Bitcoins, but that's basically a limit of 21 million of the program with the name Bitcoin over it. It's not a limit on the exact technology. Oh, and the other thing was, Bitcoin right now, the processing fees are so high that it can't be used to like buy a cup of coffee, from my understanding, that it's not really worth it for that. So it's more at this point large money transfers, which is still very useful in many ways. But I think that was what the Bitcoin Cash fork was about, was making it more affordable to buy a cup of coffee or things like that. But the IOTA or LOTA, or the one that you mentioned, Lance, is fee free. From what I understand. Yeah. So that's an exciting one as well.
Is there anybody else who wishes to speak? Lance wishes to
I'll just
speak again.
I'll follow up to John. So the Lightning Network. So there's the big 3 coins right now. So Bitcoin, there's Ethereum, and then there's Litecoin. Litecoin is it's essentially a copy, but a multiplier of 4 of Bitcoin. So there's 84 million that would be mined in total, but it's incredibly fast. Like, they're supposed to do an international transaction in 4 seconds. And that's the reason for it, and that's why I think, John, I didn't heard that either, that Bitcoin is translating over to that network, because the transactions are so slow. There have been times where we have been trying to make transactions, and it takes 12 hours, maybe 24, and part of it is coming from this huge demand, but the creator of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto, I think that's another fail-safe that he, magically put into this algorithm is, it's supposed to be slow because it's supposed to not allow for these giant fluctuations in wealth, right? You're supposed to trust that, nobody can just dump it and crash it. Now, there's arguments for it can go to 0 instantly and all that, and I get that. And then 2 other websites I'd recommend if people really just want to go all in and read as much as they can. Coindesk.com is awesome. And then Cointelegraph. And then if you're looking for a really good app, if you start trading and buying in, is Blockfolio. So I keep track of all my cryptos on there, what's going up, what's going down, and then there's a news section, and that's where I just referenced those other 2. But sky's the limit. I think it's worth it to at least look into all this and see where it's at, because in February, Amazon's going to make their big announcement on where their HQ is going, and then I think it's I have some insider info. I have some people that work at Amazon, and they say, well, we don't know if we're going to do Bitcoin or we're just going to issue our own crypto. Ooh. So the tide is, what do you do when a major corporation like Amazon, who now owns Whole Foods and is Amazon and has all these distribution networks, what do you do? What does the government do? Like, do they wage war on them when they say we're going to start accepting cryptos? I think that's what 2018 is really going to reveal is where does this weird corporation, these massive corporations, that get all these subsidies from the government, and now they start to fight each other, as soon as that happens. So.
They will wage war.
It'll be whoa, Larry! You need to talk into the microphone and not mumble.
Yeah, you're right.
I just happened to make the comment. They will wage war, and it will be through antitrust.
Okay, we have Blake. Could you move the microphone over there in front of your mouth? Thank you.
Like this?
Not that close.
So, Bitcoin. I'm curious about the experts who know about cryptocurrencies, because it's a competitive marketplace. Will Bitcoin lose its luster and possibly have a tulip crash because another cryptocurrency takes over the market? Because there's less interest in it.
That's my point with the is it IOTA or is it LOTA?
IOTA.
IOTA. So IOTA is a fee-free network.
Okay.
That is much faster. Litecoin is much faster. So there are other cryptocurrencies that will compete and become better. So I think even at the very beginning, Bill made the point, could this be MySpace? Of course. Absolutely it could be MySpace. But MySpace made a bunch of people a bunch of money. It also lost the people a bunch of money, I would imagine. And then Facebook came up, was much better. So that is absolutely a possibility in a competitive market. There's no guarantee that Bitcoin is going to be the last one standing. Look at Ethereum Classic, great example. Ethereum blew when the fork happened. The Classic, the first coin that the fork came off of, is worth a tenth or a hundredth of what the newer version is.
How do you buy IOTA?
Say it again.
How do you buy IOTA?
Okay, 1 second. I'm sorry for that.
For a lot of these coins, these weird ones we're talking about, like IOTA, and Ripple, which I'll get into next, is you're gonna have to first buy Bitcoin in a lot of places and then trade for it. I think. Go ahead, John.
Kraken.
Except Kraken.
Which is based out of the UK.
And then what I would add on to John is, I think, if you're going to get into this, I'm trying to give general advice, and the advice is have a spread of these, because John makes a very good point of there's going to be one or two that I think that emerge that are the standard. So one that I've had my eye on, and over the past week it has quadrupled in price, which is insane, is Ripple, XRP. That one, in my world, I call it the status coin, because I think 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, Amex, American Express, said they're going to start using it on their networks. And what they do is this coin, they've already issued everything. There's no mining involved. It feels like the government's involved with it. But they do it. But it is an incredible it is a credible coin, because you can do international transactions in 2 seconds. Like, it's insane. And tomorrow, Japan and South Korea are doing their first true test between 61 banks to see how much they can circulate. And so it's popped because of that.
I think a week ago it was 22 cents a coin, and I just looked during this meeting. Mike was ahead of you.
And Mike, take the mic.
Kind of
Mike.
response to that.
You have a response to that? Yeah. Okay.
I was just adding to
More or
the
less a
Ripple.
response.
Yeah, I just got to keep a certain amount of order. Go ahead, Mike.
There's this whole wild and woolly world called initial coin offerings, which we haven't really touched on. But the point is that just about anybody can come up with a new cryptocurrency, and there's a lot of marketing and promotion involved in that. And so with regard to a lot of people are coming up with a lot of different coins, the initial coin offerings, and it's kind of like initial stock offerings in that there's a pretty good chance it'll go up, but it really depends on the marketing and how crowded, and it's becoming more and more crowded a field. Now, with regard to a lot of these coins, the ones that have been around for a little while, there are exchanges. Bitfinex comes to mind for me, for example, that where you can exchange one coin to another. Basically, the push of a mouse button. It's
Say that again.
Bitfinex, Bitfinex.
Yeah.
And that's a popular one. And you can get a Bitfinex account. It's there out of some former Soviet bloc country with just basically an email address, and then can trade coins from there. But the problem with that level of not having a know your customer kind of laws, it's possible that the FBI could come in anytime and shut down any of these exchanges, especially if they don't play nice with the powers that be. And as a matter of fact, a exchange that did happen to exchange sometime in the last year, where everybody was trading on it, and one day there's just a splash page that says, "We're the FBI and we took it all." And by the way, the biggest owner of Bitcoin right now, after the inventor or inventors of the Bitcoin, actually is the FBI, because that's what they've been doing, is Silk Road and taking down whoever they can and taking all the Bitcoins. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Finally, with regard to trusted third parties, there are different algorithms. Now, Bitcoin happens to use a pretty simple algorithm, but there's different algorithms as to validating what is a valid transaction, and that's not necessarily limited. There's a problem currently with Bitcoin in that Initially, Bitcoin mining was done by zillions of computers every place, but in the meantime, economies of scale have taken hold, so that these days Bitcoin miners are places where electricity is very cheap,
Venezuela.
or China or such, and also Bitcoin hardware has become increasingly expensive, so you have to buy a lot of it in order to reach economies of scale. So it is entirely possible for a few large actors to have significant control over Bitcoin simply because of the economy of scale issue.
All right. We have John, then Blake.
No, Blake's good. I got mine in.
Okay, Blake.
I have a question probably for John or Lance or somebody. What is the Trusted IoT Alliance? And is IOTA, or what cryptocurrencies are open and which ones are private or anonymous?
Lance?
The only two that I have heard of that are truly anonymous are Monero and Byte.
Well, how about Zcash?
Zcash too. You're correct. You are correct. And that was one of the first ones right after Bitcoin
Yes.
came out. Yeah.
Yeah, Zcash right now is not doing as well as Monero on account of just marketing.
And the Trusted IoT Alliance?
That one I think is completely open source.
No. Do you know what is it?
The IOTA thing?
No. Trusted IoT Alliance.
Oh no.
So I read up on IOTA, and it says that U.S. Bank is one of the members of the Trusted IoT Alliance. So I'm wondering
I
if...
think it's just a series of corporations that have said, okay, we're going to buy into this network. Yeah, that's all. So that's what I'm seeing. There are status
like how
coins.
Amex bought into Ripple. Correct.
Okay, so I have a question for Lance and Mike, which is, assume that I have X number of dollars I wish to invest in buying Bitcoin. Okay, where would I go? What's the safest place? What's the safest way to do that transaction?
Define safe.
Exactly.
Something where I'm not likely to lose more than 10% of that lose more than 10% of my money in the transaction.
I recommend Kraken, just because it's easier than Coinbase, and Coinbase puts a 5-day hold on what you're doing. So it takes 5 days to get 5 days to a week to get your purchase.
And when is the?
It is the easiest to sign up for, though. I will say that it took me about 2 months to get my stage 3 or level 3 clearance at Kraken, which is kind of like unlimited money transactions, because you have to submit all this information. That's the other thing, is when you get on these, you are not anonymous. You have to submit your social security card. I had to do ID. I had to do my passport. I had to do several things to make sure that I was who I was, because they are being held liable by governments. So that is one thing you have to keep in mind. To get it, you have to put a lot of personal information onto Coinbase, onto Kraken, onto whatever you're doing with. If you're a beginner, I really like Kraken.
And could you please spell Kraken?
Kraken.
Okay, and it's kraken.com?
Is it one?
Yeah,
Okay.
just one.
And it's
Kraken.com.
One
Yep.
K, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. My phone just died, otherwise I'd show you guys it. But they do offer two-phase authentication to prove that you are who you are to get into your everything. I've been using it for 6 months. I haven't had any issues. So just like a personal review type thing, I'd highly recommend. I like it a lot more than Coinbase.
Okay. Okay, go ahead, Steve.
Regarding
And please
hard
stand.
wallets, using your own wallet, but how, it's something I've never really understood, is getting from the exchange to the wallet and back to the exchange. How does,
Specifically.
yeah.
Yeah, I need to know that too.
So you have, you have wallets. You have wallet addresses also on the exchange. So you are sending, let's say you're on your computer and you go from you put money on your computer in that wallet, and then you just, copy the address, the receiving address up on the exchanges to, where you're sending it to in the wallet.
Basically like email.
Okay.
That's what it
Yeah. The one trick, though, I will say this, and that if people are actually serious about this, is when you are taking money, and you're almost doing anything on the exchange, watch for that. There'll be a second email that says, "Are you sure you want to do this?" I've had some employees at work claim that Bittrex was stealing all their money, and I go, "Did you check your email for the second email?" And they're like, "No." Okay, do that.
I think Kraken's $5 to pull
Please,
money out.
please.
John. I think Kraken is $5 to pull money off, and that's pretty affordable. You're not
So
gonna
it's
lose 10
so it's $5 per transaction.
to pull money out. So say
Any amount?
Yeah, and you have limits based on your level of clearance. The personal
Pull
information you
U.S.
submitted.
money out or to pull?
Yes, to put U.S. money into your bank account.
Okay.
So if you wanted to transfer, say you had some pretty good gains. So this, I'm just going to kind of share one of my strategies, and I think Mike Maloney does the same thing. He owns Bitcoin. Bitcoin blew up. He took some of his profits, converted it into silver because silver's in a 6-year bear market. So just if you are trying to do things like that, Kraken works pretty well.
So it doesn't matter whether you want to move $10 or $10,000. It's a $5 transaction.
Yes.
All right.
On Kraken.
Anybody else wish to speak?
Ralph?
Then please stand.
I have to stand?
Please, because I can't get the camera.
Since this
to
is
see you.
obviously a popular topic, I think we should do this again with John and Lance and Mike and any other knowledgeable people. Maybe have an open discussion.
I'm easy for that. Lance, how are you willing?
Yes, and I would like to maybe even give do my part in that in the mining part of it. Because one thing I've found frustrating online lately is, all the naysayers. I appreciate them being skeptical about this, and it is scary to look at a wall like this going up and saying, "Oh my God, what goes up
Tulipmania.
has to go down." Tulip mania, right? And a lot of them say that without, understanding. One of the first questions I ask them is, "Have you read the white paper?" No. Your opinion holds no weight to me. Or have you even watched the movie on Netflix? And then the third thing I ask him is, do you understand what it takes to mine? And so, Mike, you bring up a really good point about mining. At this point, you cannot. The biggest mining manufacturer there is bitmain.com. You can't get a Bitcoin miner right now. You can't. I think maybe my firm, or sorry, me and my group of guys maybe have got some of the last ones for the shipment for the next 6 months. Litecoin miners on that website are going to sell out very, very soon because the price keeps skyrocketing. But in order to get those miners, first you got to have enough US dollars. Then you got to trade it into Bitcoin. Then you have to trade for Bitcoin Cash, Bcash, and then you have to make the purchase through Bcash over to China. Like, they're only accepting that to get the hardware. And then you got to figure out how to
Shall we leave that for your next discussion?
Yeah, but my point is,
That's what you're going to dive into.
it's like the levels to get there
Yeah.
are nothing to be overlooked as far as if you can try to say there's some kind of value, not intrinsic value, because I don't believe that as a libertarian, but there's some kind of value from just a market standpoint of how you start and how to build up something to be even a miner. I think there's a very big point of discussion.
You said miners are the bank, right?
They make, yeah.
Martin Armstrong made the comment that this whole thing could end really fast if the government declared miners to be a financial institution.
Yeah.
And regulated as such.
Well, yeah, in the United States, a government, but the thing about
Mike, I'm sorry, Blake was before you. Go ahead, Blake.
I'd like to see if we have just one or if we have multiple ones, conversation about blockchain.
Okay.
More of a general concept about blockchain. Because blockchain is what's behind cryptocurrencies. And blockchain, you asked me for a prediction on Bitcoin. I don't like Bitcoin, okay, but I love blockchain. Blockchain that's where we're going.
Repeat your shit.
Pardon me? Okay, yes. So blockchain would have to do with ownership, would have to do with keeping your records and validating records, and blockchain's where it's at. So I'd love to see us do something, Ralph, on blockchain, in addition to perhaps mining, but blockchain.
Are you an expert on
I
blockchain?
have no.
Okay, then we
I
have
just
to
love
find
blockchain.
somebody. Is anybody here an expert on blockchains?
What do you want to know?
Pardon?
What do you want to know?
I think we have a resident expert.
Very good.
Enough
Would you
to
consider
explain
your-
it to the rest of us.
It is an open ledger.
Right.
When you
public
do a
record.
transaction, it is logged in. You can't go back and erase the earlier login.
Uh-huh.
And that is distributed in a true peer-to-peer distributed currency fashion. And that is being spotted by tech investors as a potential tool for doing other things, such as reporting
deeds to property,
Right.
or many, many other things.
We have Larry who's next, and please take the microphone in front of you.
Can I make a quick comment while I get the microphone? The CEO of Overstock.com is going to sell his business to invest in a blockchain venture.
Patrick Byrne.
Larry, you're up.
The questions that come up in the open ledger, the blockchain, was related to what I'm concerned about, and I think it also relates back to the Denmark question. Okay, is there any limit or reasonable way to limit these ledgers so that they don't consume the entire computing power of the world?
Yes.
And, I'm glad to hear that. Okay, might ask maybe when you get to the blockchain part to actually have. So you do have an expert there, right? For this bubble or non-bubble or such, I had heard. Did anybody else hear anything along this line that the Chinese have been providing much of the demand for at least the last couple of months?
Yes.
Anybody?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Ever since they said you can't have this, it has been a great accelerant to adoption.
Sounds like the 60s.
Yeah, okay. What I'm concerned is asset forfeiture, asset seizing, and such. One of the advantages I thought was in an electronic wallet was that you could duplicate your wallet and keep it somewhere safe. Okay? And is that no longer true? Okay, or can you actually duplicate your wallet, or the commercial wallets anyway, duplicate it so that if they come and seize it and says, good luck getting it, they says, well, we're keeping you from it too, and it says, oh darn, that's right, and then go off to my copy, okay, and save it somewhere else. Okay? So that is possible?
Yes, it is.
Okay, all right, good.
So we have the gentleman who does not wish to be identified.
In terms of Denmark,
Yell.
in terms of Denmark, there are some funky things. First, it's obviously a very small country. Secondly, they are ego committed to greening their source of electricity. They take 20% of their electricity total and have the capacity to make that much wind electricity, but it's only a 30% load factor, so they actually make 6% of their electricity from wind.
And then there's transmission losses. So.
And they also put their thumb heavily on the scale with taxes and subsidies to adjust it to that. So they're kind of upfront about their ego being tied to their electricity. In terms of electricity, computers are getting more efficient all the time. There's still many silly losses. Wall warts are one source of constant loss, leaving computers on, etc. But as time goes on, the newer generations do much more computing for much less electricity.
And I'll add a little bit to that, and then Mike, you first, and then I'll add to what what that gentleman just said.
And you can also ask what Denmark has ever done for you, so you can explain that Bitcoin is a far better investment if you have to cut one off. Let Denmark go back to the coal.
With regard to the cost of electricity in Bitcoin, this may become a limitation on Bitcoin in that the algorithm itself demands more and more, in effect, electricity use. The whole concept of mining Bitcoin or many other cryptocurrencies is basically you're taking electricity, expensive hardware, and turning that into heat and a cryptocurrency, if you want to think of the equation that way. There's currently research and marketing happening with regard to how you make cryptocurrencies more energy efficient. and it's possible that Bitcoin will become more energy efficient. This whole concept that we haven't really talked about and only vaguely referred to about having a cryptocurrency fork, that is to say, in effect, changing the algorithm and deciding, and then letting the market decide which algorithmic choice is the right one. That's one way the market will adjust for the transaction costs, is that either Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency will become superior simply because of, like I said, the transaction cost wanting to be as low as possible. That's one item. And another item is with, as I already started to explain, it is possible with Bitcoin and with other cryptocurrencies that you only save the seed value, which is a number or a combination of words, and as long as you're the only one that has those words and there's no trace of that wallet on any computer, in other words, that has been erased, nobody can get to that wallet. It's theoretically just impossible to find, recover the seed if you don't have those words. So you do have to be somewhat careful in covering your tracks and making sure that once you have the wallet turned into those 12 or 13 words, that no trace of that wallet exists on any computing device. And at that point, there's no way to do anything with that, with that, whatever's in that wallet account, because as long as you're the only one that has the words, nobody has access to that. So it's possible to do that.
But that wasn't my concern, though. Okay, my concern was, what if they get the wallet? Okay? And I've been denied my access to it. Okay?
Well, as I mentioned,
they can't get it out. Okay?
Yes,
or burns up in a fire, or some other thing. And,
sure.
You know, how do I? I don't want my entire fortune burn up in a fire. Right?
Sure. Right. Yes. Yes. So that's why you have those backup words.
Okay.
And as it is possible for somebody to confiscate your computer with your wallet and get control of it. However, if you delete the wallet off the computer, completely erase it, and only have the words, you have absolute and complete control, and nobody else will be able to get access to that particular wallet or account until you take those words, plug it into the wallet software again, which recreates the wallet, and then you can continue transacting. But as long as you have those words buried in a hole in the ground, and that's the only remnants of that wallet you have complete control.
We have Blake, then Ralph.
Question about
Move the microphone to you.
question about the words in the wallet. So if you, in the scenario you just described, where you have a wallet, the wallet gets confiscated or destroyed, or you erase it from your computer, how do I phrase this? And you recreate it. If you didn't erase it from your computer, can two people be accessing the same wallet at the same time? Or can you change, can you change the words you're using to access the wallet, which then block them from getting into it?
No, you can't change the words, but whoever has those words will be able to maintain control of the wallet. So if I give you those 12 words, you and I both would be able to transact that same wallet.
I would like to ask Lance and Mike and anybody else who is deep into all this stuff, if they would come back and do a practical session of, of somebody like me,
Bitcoin ownership.
Create a Bitcoin wallet and do the ownership thing, and perhaps do it for a $50 wallet, $50 in, so that we can simply learn the practicality of all this. Does that make sense? And are you willing to do that?
I would love to help. Yeah, sure.
Mike, would you be willing to do that as well? Yeah. Then, with that, is there anybody else who wishes to speak other than that? I would like to.
Can I say one thing real quick?
Go ahead, John.
Cool. Most of you probably know this. Jared Polis announced to run for governor. We had a pretty good candidate running for C2 for Libertarian in Todd Mitchum. He bowed out due to pressure from opposition. So right now nobody's running for CD2 for the Libertarian Party, and it is a pretty easy nomination. If anybody's ever been to the convention, I know.
Are you saying you're going to be running for it?
I'm not saying I'm going to. I'm trying to recruit. I'm willing to do it. I'm actually going to talk to Lance after this meeting about it. Mark Montoni, many of you probably know him if you've been involved in the movement, is trying to recruit at the moment as well, and he's not even in CD2. But I think it's a great marketing platform for the Libertarian Party in general, because you're going to get a lot of headlines. You're going to be able to hopefully get in the debate. If anybody saw what happened with Mark Wicks up in Montana, he wasn't going to be allowed in the debate. Libertarians from across the nation started emailing the networks, and we got him onto the debate stage. So just something to think about. If you know anybody who's a libertarian, if you yourself are interested, there could be more than one person vying for it, which would be even better. And then you would just have to show up at the convention, nominate yourself, have somebody nominate you, and then an approval voting process would take place to pick the nominee to run for CD2.
John, as chair of the Libertarian Party of Boulder County, all I ask is that whoever gets nominated for as Libertarian for CD2, that person not, please, dear God, not be a line holder. Okay, that is, all they do is put their name on the ballot, and they're off.
Right, I agree 100%.
John, Lance.
Please forgive my dumb question. What is a CD2?
Congressional District 2.
Oh, okay.
They're sitting in.
The one Polis is.
The one Polis vacated.
Has
Oh,
So
okay.
it's an open seat. It's a pretty sweet opportunity.
One of Polis
He
is
vacated
in
it?
right now.
he's still in it, right?
He's going to run for governor. So
Okay, but
He's
he's
running
still
for
in it now,
governor,
right?
But there's an election in 2018.
Right, it
for
will be
that
vacant.
seat.
Right.
It will be vacant. It will be an open seat. There will be no
Incumbent.
incumbent. Thank you.
Okay, is there anybody else who wishes to speak before I shut this thing down? Hearing none, I want to have everybody here, please applaud Mike and Lance, who have given, their, and then a round of applause to ourselves for being so absolutely open-minded. Okay, and with that, I am shutting down the recording.